No problem. All right, folks. Morning. Welcome to yet another day, a Friday. It seems like it's a bit of a slow day for some, but maybe they'll come on as we get going. Talking about risk again, but I don't see Herman as yet, so maybe he'll come on with his assessment tool, which he was asking to show us yesterday. But in the meantime, I think let's just get going. So Lee, over to you.
Yes, I'm sort of relying on Herman because I sort of was thinking about the day or this chat specifically around.
Maybe that was taking a risk, Lee. I mean, you never know.
Yeah, maybe not. So I was thinking about it not so much just in terms of what is risk and those questions, but what is good risk and what is bad risk, and how would we evaluate that? And so that's where I needed Herman to come in, but I think it'd be good to have some discussion around that. I want to start with a story of a documentary that I watched of these adrenaline junkies, and there was this one particular chap started skydiving, and he just got hooked on it, and it was exciting and wonderful. And that then led to, he was one of the very first men to ever do base jumping. So, base jumping is where you jump not from an airplane, but from a solid point, so a mountain or a bridge or something, and then the parachute opens at a certain point just before you reach. So you've got a lot less time before the parachute opens. And he did that and he became a professional base jumper. These guys that get sponsored to do this, and he would be filmed. So he kept going to exotic and more dangerous locations to do the base jumping until that actually wasn't enough for him either. By this stage, he was married. He had a young kid, now close to his 40s. And he then started doing this jumping with this flight suit. Sort of looks, those flying squirrels that have got the flaps here. And then between his legs, there was a flap. And now, of course, there's almost no control. Well, there is no control. You're literally jumping, and the suit has to flip out as soon as it can in order for you, and you've got much, much less time. So each time he's now increasing the level of risk, and they knew that this was very, very high risk, and he just kept insisting he would do it, and eventually he died. He jumped off the mountain. There wasn't enough time. His suit didn't open properly, and he died. And the reflections on his death were, he died the way he lived. This is the way he wanted to die. And I'm thinking, stupid idiot, he's got a child, for goodness sake. This isn't something that you just say, oh, well, he lived how he died. So that's the mom and the wife and me. I tell my husband, if he dies, I'm going to kill him. So, that's me. So tell me what you think in terms of what is good risk, what is bad risk, and when do you take the leap? When is it sensible not to?
Great, Lee. Thanks. Yeah, I've also recently read a couple of books by a chap by the name of Steven Kotler. The first, I think, is called The Rise of Superman, and the second is called Stealing Fire. And both those books deal with exactly those kinds of things that you're talking about, those kinds of people. And the really interesting thing that they talk about there is, all dramatic progress in any endeavor, whether it be sport or business, is as a result of somebody stepping into the unknown, doing something that's never been done before. And that kind of risk and getting what they call into the flow. I mean, the old term used to be the zone, but they're now calling it the flow. So, and there's a project called the Genome Flow Project, which deals with all of these elements and high performance in different areas. So it's a fascinating topic, and I really enjoy it. So yeah, that's a good way to start off this morning. So let's go to the high risk component in our Wisdom's tribe this morning. That must be Jasper. So Jasper, let's come across to you.
I wonder how I acquired that title. But I was thinking about, what is why high risk for one person is achievable for another person. And that's why that person that we look at and say, I would never do that. For instance, you won't get me on high buildings. I'm frack scared of heights and bungee jumping and stuff like that. But if I think through it logically, there's actually little risk in it because you are totally strapped down. And as long as the people have done their job correctly and the science is correctly worked out, you're okay. I'm still too scared to do it. But like you say, other people say, no, that's too mild. Let me rather jump with these suits. And it makes for spectacular photography. But I always admire people. And I think a while back they had some celebrations on the trip to the moon. And I thought of those first few people who would get in a space shuttle and with nothing really to protect them except that piece of metal between them and the environments. Yeah, so I don't know what comes up in the minds of people, but thank God he made us all differently. So I'll probably not die of some sort of scary adventure like doing the doozy in a canoe over rapids or jumping off buildings or stuff like that. I think my scary thing is to make Helen cross. That's the extent of my scare.
Yeah, I knew you were a high risk individual. Yeah, you married Helen. You had to take a big risk to do that. So well done, Guy. Let's come across to you. I mean, you faced guys throwing balls, hard objects at you at 140 k's an hour. So I mean, that must be pretty scary stuff.
Morning all, good to be back. Sorry, I've been busy being busy like all of us, but anyway, that's how it is. Yeah, just fascinating. I saw Lee's mail yesterday and the deep discussion on risk. Yeah, it's I'm just here to listen today. Risk. Look, I don't like to go into a lift. Forget that. That is a huge risk for me, so I don't go into lifts. So if I've got to walk up 10 flights of steps, so be it. But back in the day, if I want to go down memory lane, facing balls of 140 kilometers an hour with no helmets, etc., I suppose that we were just conditioned like that. We were just conditioned, and we were just very confident in our ability to actually not get hit or whatever. So we didn't really think of the risk. So I suppose that's a good point. We didn't think of the risk, so we just went and did it. Yeah. But good to be being busy with you guys. Thank you.
Great, Guy. Thanks. Let's get across to Cecile.
Oh, sorry, guys. This morning I'm completely distracted because I'm working on a Mursa deal and they have to sign contracts. So that's the risk I'm taking today. We're talking about millions of risks. I've been thinking whether I am a risk person or not. I think I probably am higher risk personality than most people. And offhand, I can't think of any risks except for physical risk by going off a black slope skiing. Well, I've bungee jumped, skydived, but I don't see that as risky. I love skydiving. It doesn't feel like falling. It's great. Financially, I never thought I was risky, but yeah, last 2 days, I think I am. I'm dabbling in the millions, yeah. But yeah, so I'm listening with bated breath to all of you.
Great, thanks, Cecile. Mpulela, let's come across to you.
Sure, difference between good risk and bad risk. Look, I think I'll take a little bit from what's been said already, that probably knowing yourself is one way to determine whether a risk is good or not. It probably has to be in line with your purpose, should I put it like that? Because, yeah, I guess if you are not a heights person and you do that, it's a risk that might kill you by heart attack, if not by falling. So probably the first difference between a good and a bad risk. Secondly, in my mind, I'm thinking that probably calculating the risk is one way to determine whether it is good or bad. Probably then the question is how well or how is one able to calculate whether it is a good risk or a bad risk. At the top of my head, I'm thinking if it adds very little value, probably it's not a good risk. But if it is that beyond that risk, there's much winnings. Yeah, maybe that risk is worth taking. Right.
Great, thanks, Mpilo. Let's go across to a man who always calculates the level of risk when he dives into something, Trevor.
Yeah, well, you'll tell more lies about anything else as well. But yes, I think everything is an educated risk. So I certainly, I enjoy the thrill of endeavors. My heart doesn't like what it is that I do. I came home from Disney World at the beginning of last year with a T-shirt. I'm sure some of you remembered it. And we did, well, my daughter forced me to do 7 of the most, well, all I can say, brown pants inspiring adventure rides ever. In fact, let me get it, yeah. Because this is a continued inspiration. I think you'll see there 7X from Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. Not many people actually get the T-shirts. And as you were talking in the beginning, Lee, you were talking about this guy with his butterfly suit or whatever he had flying. What about all the people that climb up to the top of Mount Everest? I mean, from the beginning there, most dangerous in that is the first 180 kilometers that they actually walk to get to base camp, let alone get into the top. And these people pay $50,000, or they used to about 10 years ago, so it's probably about $150,000 just to get to base camp. And they have a strong chance of actually dying. So they leave their families, they leave their kids, they leave everyone just for one thing, to achieve an objective to get to the top of that mountain. And we've known personally guys, in fact, did they find our boykie that went up there about 10 years ago and died? I can't remember his name. But it's quite amazing how driven by something to achieve, and they ignore everything behind them, their family, their lives, so I think they're crazy. But I do understand there's a thrill, there's a drive for achievement. So how do you live this life? If you just sit back in your armchair, you die from being fat and your heart implodes anyway. So I don't know. I love the thrill of doing things and doing new things.
Thanks, Trevor. Let's come across to Steve.
Thanks, Simon. I'm not entirely sure what I should share at this point. I'm just enjoying listening to other people's take on risk. Yeah, perhaps come back to me.
Good, will do. Let's go across to Kevin.
Morning, everyone. So I missed out on the first part of the conversation yesterday. So, well, so I agree with what Jasper says there. Anything to do with heights, I'm with you on that one. I can't do that. Even inside a building on the high floors, I feel a bit tetchy. And likewise with what Lee said, you know, anybody that does those sort of things, I do feel they're a bit like a sandwich short of a picnic. But then again, we've got to appreciate what they do, otherwise we wouldn't have the things we've got in life today, like aircraft, for example. Someone has to do the thing first, so you have to respect what all these pioneers, etc., do. But personally, on the physical front, I'm certainly a bit risk averse. A bit less so in the financial world, I suppose. But yeah, as for what's a good and a bad risk, I think it's about the probability. Think about the probability of the outcome, I think, is what I would relate to, whether it's worth doing or not.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Let's go across to Nazipa. Nazipa, your thoughts on it?
Thank you, Evan. Good morning, everyone. I find that when I was young, I probably was very open to taking risks, and I probably lived by that quote that says, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. So I used to do a lot of risky things, like without even thinking about it. Like, the riskier it was, the more I wanted to get involved. But as I grow older, I somehow now just get scared, and I don't know why. Like, I've always wanted to go climb up at Moses Mabhida. I still haven't done that to this day. I did, however, manage to swim the Mid-Mamao twice, and I want to do it again next year. But now I start thinking, hey, what if? So I now more scared of taking risks. I don't know, but I also find that part of the reason why sometimes I become scared of taking risks financially is the fear of failure. And probably for me, if I can work on my fear of failure financially, I probably would be more open to risk. I don't know. I think I come from a situation where there was a time where not too long ago, I found myself having lost everything. And in the process of getting everything back, I also don't want to find myself losing things again. So I think now I'm thinking, in my 20s, for example, I always say I probably made my first success in business when I was in my 20s, before I turned 30. And I lost that. But it wasn't a biggie, because I bounced back again when I was in my 30s. And then when I hit my 40s again, I lost. And now I'm too scared, because now I'm thinking, there's no way I'm losing again at 40 and at 50. So now I'm more accumulating than taking risks. I don't know if that makes sense.
Ah, it does, of course. Yeah, thanks for that, Nazipa. Let's go across to Sally.
Morning, guys. Okay, wow, this is just such an interesting topic. I'm having such fun just sitting listening, but I do have a few thoughts. So I echo 100% what Mpumelelo says. It's 100% resonates with me. And then actually everybody as well on the group, I'm loving hearing the different thoughts, and I can relate to most every single aspect that has been discussed here this morning. But I think for me, so Lee asked the question, can we calculate all risks? I think adding on to what Nozipo just said is that I don't think in life you are in a position to always calculate every single risk. For example, I spoke yesterday about the divorce that so it was sort of get out or die, sort of, and it's a little bit dramatic, but that's, if you have to do something at whatever the cost. So I don't think it's always possible to calculate all the risks. And then what Nozipo said, I would just like to add to that in terms of, I think the older a person gets, the more responsibilities we have. The calculation of the risk is more sort of it's a bigger, it's a bigger calculation, if I can say it like that. For example, I wouldn't do things now, with two small children that I would have done maybe 10 years ago, because the risk is just too great. I wouldn't have minded if I'd gotten, not minded, but it would have been okay for me if I had done, gone skydiving and maybe something had happened to me, or but if I want to do that now, then it's sort of, I'm going to think twice about things that I do. But that's just my 2 cents.
Right, thanks, Ellie. Let's come across to Donovan. Morning, Donovan. Donovan, are you with us? Can you unmute your mic?
Hi, morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear, thank you.
Yes. I actually thought of, after my comment of yesterday, to relate it to my profession. As a quantity surveyor by profession, I often have to deal with managing, the financial risk on a project. It's actually a full-time thing to manage a risk. Yeah, it starts with before you decide, when you decide, and when you actually in that process or project, or activity that involves the risk. So you actually need to manage the risk from start to end. That's my take on it.
Great, thanks for that, Donovan. Let's go across to Stella.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, it's been very interesting listening to everyone. I think there's different types of risks, financial risk, physical risk, that one is prepared to take. So for me, when Jasper spoke about bungee jumping, I went ice cold. I'm very scared of heights, but yet I would do, like in an adventure park, all these rides, and even if it goes high, I'll do that. And I actually love doing that. I scream from the top of my lungs, but I enjoy that. So I think all my life I've been very wary of taking, especially financial risk. But I think lately, for the last couple of years, I've become more risky. I think also I can resonate with Nosipu. I think previously, because I was always thinking about what impact it would have on my family, especially a financial risk if I took that, where now, it's easier for me to take on other risks. And I actually, about 2 years ago, I went with a friend on a motorbike on the highway, and I was at first scared to do it, and it was amazing. We, at one stage, we were going like, I don't want to say it too loud, like 160, and it was so nice. And then when I realized how fast we were going, I said, no, go slower. But yeah, so I'm at the stage of my life where I think it's so exciting, because life is such a journey, and you sometimes you would take more risks than other times, depending on your circumstances. So I'm ready to take more risk on in my life. Just I met, just to share something else, I met someone very special that wanted a relationship, and I think it's that if you're too scared to get hurt again, then you are scared to take that risk. And yeah, so I'm working on that one. Anyway, have a good day and a great weekend, everyone.
Great, thanks, Stella. I think some good points there. Steve, so we can come back to you.
Thanks, Owen. I think all the discussions about heights has made me think of just something out of my past. So at some point I was faced with having to learn how to work with ropes on rock, climbing and abseiling, and being able to lead those activities. And I was terrified to start with. I'd had a terrible experience when I was 13, my first abseil. And I had gone down a 9-meter cliff face, and I thought I'd gone down 3 kilometers, and it took me about 17 days to finish. but the instructor who took us through the course, who I knew quite well at that point, really reassured me through the information that he shared in terms of the equipment, etc., and just his approach. And something shifted in me, and that was helpful because I then took on that role of trying to convince others to take those sorts of risks for the reward that was contained inside. And I think the two things with that was, the first was the trust between the people. So my trust with that instructor, and so just trusting him and his knowledge and his background, which really helped. And then you're able to transfer that trust to convince other people to take the same risk. And then there's a perspective shift, I think, when you know more about what's going on. Excuse me. For example, being able to tell people the strength of the ropes that you're working on, the dynamics, etc. I used to enjoy telling kids that they were safer on an abseil with me than they were on the bus trip out to us, statistically speaking. And that can make a big mindset shift. And I think that does a lot to deal with the fear of risk. And I think that's probably the main factor that stops people taking risks, is they're faced with the fear and they shut down in the face of that, rather than dealing with that fear and at least investigating. And I think that's where the risk assessment then comes in. And then you're able to make a calculated attempt at what you're doing, or you can step back having said, well, this is worth it or it's not worth it. Yeah, that's my thoughts for the morning. Thanks all.
Right, thanks, Steve. It reminds me of, I think it was an Anthony Robbins quote, which says, the meaning of fear is false evidence appearing real. And generally that's due to a lack of insight, a lack of knowledge about what the actual event is going to be. And the more knowledge and more insight you get into that, the easier it is to deal with the fear of actually dealing with those things that are making you fearful in the first place. Anyway, so I think that's pretty much us done this morning. We thought we were going to struggle to hit the bottom of the hour. We've done that quite comfortably without any difficulty at all. So Lee, over to you to wrap up.
As we've been talking, it reminds me of an article that I read some time ago that speaks about a psychological term that I can't remember exactly, but that as human beings, we actually need or desire or work towards a certain level of risk. And it's so when, and they gave the example of Australia, which is, if anybody has visited Australia, it's a nanny state of note. So they're looking to protect you from yourself at all, in any way possible. You can't even walk on the same side of the pathway, because you might bump into somebody. But they said, well, does that then reduce the number of deaths, accidents in Australia, because they are protected? And in reality, the statistics of different kinds of danger, deaths by accident, whatever, in Australia is the same as just about anywhere else. Because the minute you normalize risk in one area, people automatically increase the risk in another area. So it's interesting that we are wired to live with a certain amount of risk. So that just struck me. Because we've raised it here, I would like to just see if we can't pull through, and Guy mentioned it a little while ago, Nozipo's just mentioned it now and it's come up again, is the fear of failure, or facing fear, and how do we overcome our fears. And so I think let's raise that on Monday, thinking especially about how do we relate to fear? How do we overcome fear? How is fear good for us? So let's talk through fear on Monday. But in Mpumelelo, I kind of did sort of focus on you in the last couple of days, and then so I'm wondering on Tuesday whether you could share your story with us. I'm giving you such a lot of time to think about it. Normally, I just give people one day and they're on the next day. So you've special privilege. But would you be okay?
It's fine. It's okay.
Great. And Nozipo, you're next. So I'm giving you fair warning. So thanks everyone, and have a great weekend. And let's do that. Fear on Monday. What a way to start the week.
No fear. Have a great weekend.
No fear.